Welcome to today's webinar, everyone. Good afternoon. Our topic today is extending threat awareness beyond the store entry. This is brought to you by Flock Safety and LP Magazine. I'm your host, Stephanie Hoover. I'm editor-in-chief of LP Magazine. So if you're looking for solutions to the growing problem of ORC, you're in the right place today. And if you want to hear from experts on LPR and effective ORC strategies, you're definitely in the right place. Before I introduce our two speakers, just some housekeeping. All attendees are on mute and the chat is closed, but you can submit questions in the Q&A. That's not a problem. And we will be monitoring those and we'll answer those during the presentation or at the end. And then also please watch for a poll during our presentation today. We will be recording this and make it available to those who have registered afterwards. I'm glad to see we've got such great turnout today. And for those who want to hear from our speakers today, ORC is all over the news. And the public is really wondering, what are retailers doing about it? Well, we're doing a lot about it, but we're also searching for answers and cutting edge solutions. Our two speakers today are experts in the field. I'd like to introduce Mike Combs, CEO with Retail Crime Consulting. Mike has over 30 years of loss prevention leadership experience at companies like Federated Department Stores, Macy's, AutoZone, and lastly, the Home Depot. He retired from Home Depot in 2023 after 16 years. Mike, I have to say, retirement looks pretty good on you, bud.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, his latest role was the director of AP, where he led 100 plus world-class investigators supporting ORC and internal theft there. Our other speaker is Rich McElwain, and he's a senior solutions consultant with Flock Safety, an all-in-one technology solution. He has more than 10 years of experience in law enforcement. He was a detective and patrol officer with Cobb County Police Department in Georgia. And I'm sure Rich has a lot of great stories to tell us about Braves games down there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Rich, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll start off with a couple of quick numbers here. I don't want to bore you with all of these. Many of you are probably very aware of these problems, but I think, for this conversation, it's important to kind of identify how big the problem is. And so there's some numbers here between 40 and almost 50%, but our retailers across nationwide have said that really since COVID started, they've seen almost a 50% increase in violent shoplifters. And so with that, they're telling their employees not to get involved anymore. It's not worth losing someone's life over property crime. Because of some of these violent crimes, a lot of retailers are closing their stores for certain hours. They're reducing the number of hours that they're open. And your mother always said, things. Good things never happen after the sun goes down. And so sometimes, it's like, let's close those doors a little bit earlier in the evening. Let's open a little bit later in the morning. And we're reducing some of our impacts, some of our issues across that spectrum. And then of course, our capital cost is going up, right? Overall across retail, there's a lot of capital expense being thrown at this retail problem. And so with that, we've got with Flock, we've got about 75% of all crimes nationwide that involve a vehicle. And on the retail side, I would say that this is actually probably quite a bit higher. This came from a study on the law enforcement side, but within retail, you've got to use some kind of vehicle to generally get to where you're going. And so a lot of times I think that number is higher. But this number is probably very true across the entire spectrum. Less than 5% of all cases involve vehicle data. And so, when you have the vast majority of your cases involving a vehicle, but no additional steps to take that investigation and follow up on the vehicle that was used in the crime, that's kind of a gap in our investigations. And then currently, Flock helps both retail and law enforcement across the nation solve about 1,000 crimes per week currently. And we're in almost 4,000 cities nationwide. So the number of cities that we're not in is almost shorter than the number of cities that we are, and that list is growing every week. And I think another very important kind of stat to look at, a lot of times we talk about how the police can't respond to make an impact on these shoplifting issues. And so, about 67% of all police budgets have been cut since COVID started. And so they're having to work with less of a budget. At the same time, about 85% of all police departments are saying that their manpower is down. And so they've got less resources to respond. They've got a smaller budget. At the same time, year after year, we see about a 5.6% increase in violent crime. And so, since COVID, we're looking at, nearly a 20% increase. That's pretty significant. And, what happens on the law enforcement side certainly, spills over into the retail side. Those two are very much connected. And then I think the property crime studies are probably very low. Since COVID started, property crime has become just such a everyday common thing that a lot of times it's not being reported. It's not being reported from retailers. It's not being reported when someone's mail gets stolen or a package theft, their car gets stolen. So I think this property crime number is actually much higher than we anticipate. But yeah, I mean, why law enforcement isn't responding and how they're responding certainly plays into this conversation. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. First, if you could, we're going to throw up a poll question. And the question is, what is the biggest challenge you're currently facing at your stores? If you could fill it out for us real quick. All right. And then we'll move on here. All right. So real quick, just want to talk about, if you aren't familiar, I wanted to talk about how the flock camera works and why we're a little bit different, why we're a little more effective at tackling crime. And so what you see here in the center is our camera. And the image to the right of that is the camera fully installed. So comes it's a black camera on a black pole with a black solar panel. It's very neat and just easy, simple. The old days of having to trench power lines or data lines over to that pole are kind of gone. This type of camera works on motion and also uploads everything through cellular, and it charges off of solar. And so the camera, as you see it right there, is a fully sufficient. And there's the pole. I'll pause for a second for that. So as you were all finishing that up, you can see some of the numbers there. And obviously the organized retail crime is everyone's biggest issue here. We'll discuss some of those numbers here in just a few minutes as well. But yeah, the camera, as you see right there on the picture, is fully self-sufficient. Again, it's motion activated. And so any vehicles that go by it, with plates, without plates, doesn't matter what it is, we get an image of it. And then the software analyzes that photo for two things. One is a license plate, and separately it analyzes that photo for the vehicle details. And so, the vast majority of our cases start with a red Honda sedan with a suspect vehicle, but we have no idea what the plate was. And so you can go into the platform, search for red Honda sedan, and you get one, maybe two that pop up in that area during the time of your crime. And you can very quickly narrow that down to what your suspect vehicle is. And that allows you to take it to the next step. But I'd like to get Mike in here and talk about some of these bullet points here. Mike, what are your thoughts on trying to prevent crime, be proactive on the front end, and putting these cameras at the entry points to some of these shopping centers?
Well, I'll tell you what, Rich, I really appreciate you having me on here. I'm so excited about this type of technology. I mean, if I would have had this early on in my retail career, I may never have retired. This is exciting stuff. I mean, to be able to kind of layer this in with all the other tools that most retailers have and extend your perimeter, extend your threat assessment, and do so in a way that allows you to proactively go after the problem. You can literally get alerts outside the perimeter and know about things before they've happened. You can also tie this to other fraudulent things that happen in the store, whether it be credit card fraud, because everybody pretends they're somebody else. But when you have that license plate data point, it helps you bring other fraudulent events to light. It's not just an ORC tool because it's helping make our stores safer for customers and employees. It's all the same vicious circle of bad guys. And if you can also take out bad people, but also make your place safe, the return on investment and the feel good is just off the charts. It also to have data points that you can build as intelligent data points as part of your investigation. This is a tool that we haven't had, in my 30 years that is really a game changer in that respect. And I'd like to kind of circle back on some of the numbers, Rich, that you threw up there. I thought those were pretty important, not only on the police side, but on the retail side for sure. When we think about ORC being a $100 billion plus problem, shoplifting increasing, all of those folks that are on the call that deal with that on a daily basis, they would agree with me and say that the numbers that we're seeing are escalating so fast that when we look in the rearview mirror at last year's numbers, they don't speak the effect of the numbers where they're going up so fast that it's just escalating to where the numbers are always old by the time we report on them. And in most of my career, theft was generally kind of a deviant behavior that was kind of static over time. But we haven't seen that the last few years. It's been kind of a hockey stick going straight up in the air. So I think the numbers are definitely not speaking the full story of what we see current today. And I think the team would agree with me on that.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things too is not only the amount of the organized retail crime, but the amount of fraud that has increased over the last several years as well. That's we hear from a lot of retailers that's taken a big piece out of their shrink, and it's becoming a ever growing, ever constant problem. And these cameras, certainly help with both sides of that coin, not just one or the other.
Correct.
All right.
What I also like about it, Rich, is this slide speaks to it great, but you think about, all the different evidence that we collect in an ongoing retail investigation. Some of it is, what our opinions are, what we think we saw. This is really objective scientific evidence. It's vehicle data, it's descriptions of data, it's taking pictures, it's, mapping it up against other stuff that you've caught with your cameras. And it's very hard to refute this in an investigation in court and connecting intelligence points. It's very objective. And I think that's key. A lot of the stuff we do isn't like that. So cameras are just awesome. I think it's just a no-brainer in terms of the investigative prowess that this gives you. It helps give us leads on the retail side, but it also connects with law enforcement in what they've seen in their vehicle data search. We all know they've been using this for years. So it also is actionable leads for them, which is cool. The data, unlike a person where we can wear a mask or we can pretend we've got a different ID, we can change our hairstyle. This data doesn't change. Vehicles are vehicles. And I think that is a big help on the fraud side, what you're saying as well, Rich. And again, the way you can intercept alerts and proactively go after crimes by having the alerts tell you where the person's moving, where they're at, where the vehicle is. I think that's something we haven't had in our industry. And the biggest reason I'm excited is not only can you use this tool to reactively go after maybe an organized retail crime crew after an incident has occurred and piece together a bunch of incidents that you didn't know about, but you can proactively go about it and alert your teams that, some violent crew is headed your way. They've now hit your perimeter. You can do what you need to do, whatever steps you want to take as a retailer, you can take them ahead of the game now versus them being in your store and tearing things up. And then you dealing with the crime after the fact.
Yeah. And for anybody who's not aware, so what Mike is talking about is you can essentially use the tool to not only find the suspect vehicle you're looking for, identify that license plate, but in real time, you can turn around and create a custom hot list and be alerted when that vehicle shows up at one of your other locations. And so we've heard some great stories where a suspect hits, store 1, store 2, maybe even store 3, and they're realizing that they're kind of on a journey, traveling up the interstate, hitting multiple stores along the way. And so, they're traveling northbound on this specific interstate. And so they reach out to law enforcement. Law enforcement shows up. They're waiting at that next store that they're likely to hit, and they make the arrest right there. And kind of the beautiful piece about that is there's no going back and arguing about who was in the vehicle or who was driving. And you know, like all those little pieces that a lot of times on the back end become a questionable thing. You know, when law enforcement arrests somebody in that vehicle in real time, they know that they were in there. Their clothing is going to match the video surveillance from the other stores. And so it really helps to kind of close the gap there and wrap up some of those cases in a very quick manner. So, and you know, Mike, I'd love to know kind of your thoughts on layering in this kind of technology with your more traditional security systems that everybody thinks about. You know, your outside surveillance, your inside surveillance. You know, the tags at the entrance that alert that if someone, you know, something's being stolen, a whole variety of things, trailer surveillance in the parking lots. You know, what are your thoughts on layering in LPR data with all those things?
Well, I mean, I'm going to talk about the biggest obvious one for me, which is just if you have got camera systems inside your store and on the perimeter. If an event happens and you hear about an event in the old days, you would kind of be searching those cameras randomly and really manually until you found that event. Because again, a lot of the times you're hearing it word of mouth. In this environment, you know, you're getting this intelligence, this data point about an event that happened in a car and a vehicle plate. And then you can kind of work that one example to where you get the method of operation. And then you can take that license plate and every time it's hit another one of your stores, you know for sure that's when you got to go pull the rest of the video. So it really helps you there with the cameras. Obviously, it's another layer of defense. When you think about alarms, you think about the programs you have in your store, whether they be policies like returns and things like that you've strengthened over time to kind of keep the bad guys out of your store. This is just one more layer on top of all those programs that can kind of help you not only reactively, but also proactively. It can let you know when a previous habitual offender has entered your property. You can get that to your guard. You can get that to your asset protection team. If you don't have those, you can talk about who else in management you can alert that something is getting ready to happen. And obviously that using this with law enforcement is even better. I mean, letting them know what has happened and what you've seen in your store, and that data point is going to really get them reacting quicker than if someone just called the phone and said, "Hey, I think I had a theft in my store." So I think it just works really well with all your traditional security methods.
Yeah, you actually had a pretty great story about working with law enforcement using some of the images from a retail environment, switching over to the law enforcement cameras. Can you give us kind of the highlights on that?
Yeah, I mean, the one case that I really get excited about is we worked a case in a previous at Home Depot with law enforcement, and we were getting hit in a rural part of Georgia, and it happened on the weekend. Didn't have asset protection associates in that store. Once we got the details of the theft event, we found out it was a stolen. I believe it was some type of Hertz rental vehicle. They had reported it stolen. The law enforcement teams knew that and had descriptions. We looked at it and matched our descriptions, and with help from law enforcement and their database and repository around LPR, we were able to tie that with some thefts that occurred in our stores. And within hours, that same van had hit a bunch of stores in that area, in that rural area, and then traveled all the way down into Atlanta and did the circle around Atlanta, went over to Alabama and back and forth. And basically every single time that van went near a Home Depot store, we had a theft event at that time frame. I mean, 1 for 1. And so what looked like a random rural theft event in Northeast Georgia turned into an organized retail crime team that had been hitting South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, over to Birmingham and back out. That would have taken us probably 6 months to figure all that out. And hopefully I'm not being too long-winded here, but this is a great story. We also connected that to they were selling the product to a fence that our teams were already watching with law enforcement teams. So we knew about the fence. So it connected a whole group of where the stolen product was coming to. It answered some of those questions that we couldn't get answered. And then they sold to a whole nother group of fences that we didn't know about. So not only did it help us make the bigger case with the fence we knew about, but it opened our eyes to some other fences that were not even on our radar. So you can imagine the kind of return on investment we got out of that. Not to mention that, again, we knew about the one group of theft store events that weekend, but they turned us on to 57 other videos that we were able to pull theft events on, working with law enforcement and the LPR technology.
Yeah,
And,
that's
the thing that I think you liked the most in that one was because we were able to work that with law enforcement. Now, every time we call that agency, they know for sure we mean business, and we're just like, we're connected now with that team.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, if you've never been to Northeast Georgia, there's not much up there. It's beautiful, but there's not a ton up there. And so this kind of technology, traditionally just would never have even existed. But yeah, I mean, being able to tie that back to multiple different incidents, quickly, effectively, not having to waste those 6 months like you talked about. And think about too, that case going to court. Now the judge is aware that this is a very serious offender. It's not just one person doing one shoplifting incident in a single agency. It's one person going across multiple states, going to one specific retailer because they found a certain way of committing a specific type of crime. But yeah, I mean, they were in a stolen car. They were driving up and down the state, probably not getting not getting pulled over, obviously, because the car was stolen. It was registering as stolen. But so law enforcement was having a hard time finding it, and so you're getting the offenders off of the street. They're committing multiple types of crimes.
Yeah,
and there's no other way to do that.
That's right. The other thing is, in today's world of escalating threats and escalating violence, our asset protection and loss prevention teams, they don't just deal with that. They deal with safety, and they deal with violent encounters, robberies. So there's other things that they have to drop what they're doing to go help the company they support. This is an example of a case where it may have not made the top of the list at Home Depot. Rural store, not a really high loss store, don't have a ton of resources in that area. Would it have reached a level in that one weekend that we would have probably dropped what we were already working on to work? I don't think we would have. But because we were able to connect the other data points of that license plate all around the state, all of a sudden now it's the number one case we're working, and we didn't even know about it. So I think that could happen at many, many retailers where you're not really working the right cases, or you don't know the case in front of you is as big as it is.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's really great. And of course, a big topic right now, not only is violence across the nation up, but of course, we've got both customers coming in and making threats against employees. We've also got some of your previous employees who have been terminated, who have made threats to come back and commit acts of violence. What are your thoughts on using this kind of technology to prevent those actions?
It's awesome. And I just like to first make the obvious point that, whether you're watching your social media feeds or you're watching the nightly news, there's some evidence out there that a lot of America is going crazy. I mean, some of the events that are happening and you're able to watch now, it's definitely escalated during COVID and post-COVID. And that's a trend. When I talk to my peers in retail, they've had to deal with some violence, and people threatening violence that we didn't really have to deal with 10 years ago, whether they be employee on employee, customer on employee. So we're getting drug into some areas that we didn't have to. And I think technology like this is a game changer, again, because you can be alerted to that potential threat as it's hit way outside your doors on the perimeter of the store, wherever you have your license plate technology. Or law enforcement could be alerting you if you let them know about this particular vehicle. And that's something that gives us a little more time and a little more energy around how do we prevent this bad thing from potentially occurring now that we know it's on its way. So it's a game changer. Without this, you're waiting for them to come to your front door.
Yeah, I think some of the kind of quick, easy stories that I've heard that have been so great. There was one retailer. Essentially, there was a manager for a location. He lived near the location that he worked. His neighbor was not a big fan of him. They had a bit of a argument back and forth about the fence and whose tree was leaning over whose property. And so, just simple things. But the neighbor lives nearby. He came into the retailer one day and made a scene with the manager. So they just put her license plate onto a custom hot list, and every time she came onto the property to go shopping at her favorite grocery store, they would just have the manager step off the floor, be gone for a while. So they resolved a very simple thing. On the same hand, that same group also had one of their employees was married to a man that became very violent. The woman had gotten a temporary order against her husband, and so there were several times where he drove onto the property, sat in the parking lot, more than likely trying to get up the nerve to do one thing or another, but then left a short time later. And because they had the cameras at the entry to the parking lot, they got the proactive alert that he was there instead of being kind of surprised, caught off guard when he walked in the door. So lots of kind of opportunity and unique circumstances there.
I love it.
Hey, Rich, if I could jump in for a second, we did have a question from the audience. It was more on the technical side, and you may
Yeah.
get to this, but someone was wondering if the cameras are SIM card based for connectivity. Can you talk about that?
They are, yeah. So during the process we have, we'll use Google Maps to kind of identify some rough layout locations, and then we'll send a tech out to that location. They'll use some of the tools that we have to figure out what the best cell service is, and then based on that, we'll put up the camera with the SIM card in it that will operate off of the cell service necessary for that area.
Fantastic, thank you.
Absolutely. And so, might get into this kind of the same topic. This kind of overlaps on our previous conversation. Trying to expand some of your cases, taking it from that very simple, we're only aware of one or two or a handful of cases, and now we're going to blow this case out by looking at all the LPR data we have, looking at the network of cameras, and trying to solve more. What are some of your thoughts on that?
I see a couple different things. First off, I wanted to throw some thanks to a couple people that used to work with me. I had three managers, Jamie Bourne, Kelly Harrington, and Eric Treherne, that were busting down my door for a year about this type of technology. And it wasn't until we worked a case where I could actually see what they were talking about. And it was all about this question. If you think about, I painted a picture of that one case, how we expanded a case to 57 theft events, multiple offenses that we didn't know about. But the other side of it is if as other retailers adopt this technology, and that is happening, think about me taking a time out on this big case and saying, hey, what about Lowe's? What about Ace Hardware? What about Target? What about Walmart? Let's find out, during this same time frame, did they hit them? Next, instead of $150,000 case, it's probably $1 million case. And they can kind of wipe one off their books as well. So I think about it, expanding it, within your own theft events, within law enforcement, within all the crimes that this group may have been doing outside of retail, and then with your fellow retailers. You can expand it in three different ways. And I think that, again, you can expand it without doing a whole bunch of groundwork and a whole bunch of phone calls. It's just really, really a data-driven thing. Once you have those data points, the timestamps and the vehicle license plates. So really easy to expand it.
Yeah. To that point, there was a great story here out of Georgia. There was a crew that came from Miami. They were coming up the interstate, essentially stopped at a Metro Atlanta agency. They hit one big box retailer had flock cameras around it. The one next door did not. So they parked in the one, they didn't know any better. They parked in the one that had the cameras and went next door and committed the crime with the ones that didn't. And when the neighboring agency came over to try to investigate this crime, they were able to reach out to the local agency. Luckily, that retailer had shared the cameras. They very quickly found the suspect vehicle. They found the license plate. They put it onto a custom hot list. They were able to identify all the suspects involved, drop warrants on everybody. But that was it was a fairly simple case, but it was one of those where it was stretching across multiple states. Once you started looking into it, you realized there was much more going on, and they were able to solve it. So, just trying to expand this out across these corridors and across multiple retailers. It's going to change things in the next few years. Even the next 6 months are going to be drastically different. in the way that we solve cases.
Absolutely.
And then, using the same type of data to prevent all those like e-commerce fraud cases, those are, in a very traditional sense, those are very difficult to solve. They're very time consuming. What are your thoughts on those?
The most obvious thing that comes to mind right away is most of those people that I've dealt with are representing themselves as someone else online. They've got stolen credentials or credit cards or whatever. But when they show up to pick the product up at the store or wherever they're getting it, they usually use their own car, or they use a vehicle that you can at least identify. So I think that's interesting that you could literally uncover some of the fraudulent side of what they're doing just by tying it back to what car they're driving.
Yeah, I've heard some really great stories. Kind of two come to mind. One is it's suspect A paying suspect B, and suspect B changes every time, right? But suspect A is always using their vehicle, so they bring the suspect B in, they go in and commit the crime, they bring whatever the product is out, and it goes into suspect A's car. And so the flip side of that is you have very similar kind of fraud cases where maybe somebody is changing one letter in that fake name. Or they're changing the first name and not the last name, or the other way around, and they're creating all these fraudulent names or fraudulent businesses that they're committing crime under. But again, right, they're always using their vehicle, or at least they're using a rental vehicle for a batch of crimes before they go in and swap it out for something else. And so going back and be able to tie all those together is what makes those just much more solvable.
I agree.
All right, another one here. Trying to implement LPR program across businesses of any size. I think we've got some people on here that work for very small retailers, some that work for massive retailers, everything in between. What are your thoughts on trying to roll that out for every?
Well, I think this is one of the cool things, and this is why I'm excited about any technology that is as reactive as well as proactive, like I mentioned. But it's also something that can be leveraged by large asset protection departments or small or non-existent. This technology, it worked well in my previous departments where we had large teams, but I also think it's perfect for companies that have very, very small loss prevention or AP departments. And that's because you can gather the intelligence and use the alerting functionality to still have progress and success. And it's not meant to just have a bunch of bodies that support it, which a lot of the AP technology over the last 30 years, we had to have a bunch of security officers or loss prevention officers to actually leverage it. This is something that works for you once you know how to program it and once you know which vehicles you're looking for or what crime you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I think to that same point, we're actually seeing a lot of data at the time that's coming back telling us that it's actually making your investigators more effective, more efficient. It's taking them less time to solve these cases. And so not only are they solving bigger cases, but they're solving them faster so that they can move on to these other cases that, one, they weren't even aware of, but two, maybe it's you haven't gotten this kind of technology up at that store yet, and so you weren't able to link those things together. But it's freeing up time for other things, which is certainly something that as a company we never thought of on the front end. It wasn't a goal, but it's definitely a positive side effect. I think too. I end up mapping out a lot of these various retail locations. I think something that's interesting that I found in the mapping of these locations, there's a lot of small retailers inside the parking lot of big retailers. And so the small retailers are kind of benefiting from a lot of the purchases that the big retailers are doing. So, in a lot of ways, it's like, if you reach out to your neighbor, I think you'll very likely find they may have evidence for some crimes that you're unaware of, or at least evidence in some crimes that you're looking into. And there might be technology already right there that you were just kind of unaware of.
Yep, that's a good point.
All right. And I know we've got some questions coming in. Love to jump in here and see what we've got.
Yeah, we get some good ones here. Great stuff, guys. Appreciate you sharing all the war stories and about the technology. So one question is, Mike, was privacy a concern when you were evaluating LPR? And if so, how did you overcome it?
That's a great question. Yeah, definitely is always something that you have to think about and talk about with your legal teams. I think there are a lot of states. My memory is there's a lot of states where it's very clear that you can do this, and there's some states that don't have anything on the books. So I think it's much like some of the other new technology. Our legislation is probably way far behind the technology. But Rich could probably answer this better. I don't think we see this as personal information. This is more a vehicle picture. And Rich, I'll let you chime in.
Yeah, so that is one of the great things about Flock is, yeah, it is really just a motion activated camera that's taking an image of the back of the vehicle, and then it's giving you this vehicle was involved in this crime at this time, and that it is, it is that simple and clean. Again, we're not asking, the DMV or Carfax or anything. We're not connected to any third-party databases where we're asking who the registered owner is, or who the occupants are likely to be. It's very clear evidence about where the vehicle was and what it was involved in at that time.
And Stephanie, I would just add, philosophically, whether I've talked to a senator on the right or the left or a CEO, when you think about technology that helps you identify the habitual criminal, that's a lot different than a technology that is just, looking at all 300 million United States citizens. So I think a lot of people know that we need to use whatever technology we can to go after the habitual offenders and make our places safer.
Yeah, I think the public has the, understanding that their license plates are being looked at, right? We go through tolls every day. We go through red light cameras every day. So I think people are pretty used to that. But I am still wondering, has there been any concerns from the public? Like when they've seen a unit in a parking lot, have retailers been approached from someone in the public with a concern?
Have you heard any issues with that, Mike?
Again, I've been retired for a couple of months, but I hadn't heard of any, not one. I'm sure other people may have, so maybe we can just watch for comments.
Right.
Yeah, to that point, I think there's always there's always somebody, whether they lean right or lean left doesn't really matter, but there's always somebody that will always raise a concern. Generally, from a company standpoint, if we sit down and we have that one-on-one discussion about what we're capturing and what we're trying to solve, a lot of people more often than not are 100% okay with it. The data sits there. Nobody's combing through the data looking for anything specific. Just to do it. Every search that gets done has to come with a reason. A lot of times, for the law enforcement side, that's a case number or like a 911 call number. And so on the retail side, a lot of times that's still a case number. There's some kind of valid reason. And so there's a full audit trail of every single search that's ever been conducted in Flock. We never delete that. And so if there's any question at any point about why somebody was conducting a certain search, we can go back to that specific person and provide some evidence for it.
Interestingly enough, on a personal level, I live in a community of around 700 homes, very diverse community, not gated. And we have Flock in our neighborhood, and they have solved many crimes, one of which was a hit and run over two ladies walking in the morning. And, sad to say, one of them did end up passing away, but they found the hit and run driver through that process. But so I've heard nothing but great things from the neighborhood. It's a very diverse neighborhood, so not anything but positive stuff. So I think, to your point, Stephanie, people are used to seeing this and used to it being a tool for the positive.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of diverse environments, we had a question come in that you asked, have you ever seen this used inside of a trucking yard or another secured lot?
Yeah, we have. So, you think about these really large lots where you've got to load, hundreds of 18-wheelers, in a couple of days or given week. And there's a lot of theft from these types of facilities, especially, if they're down for certain hours of the night. Yeah, so most of them are fortunately very easy to cover. A lot of them have one main entry point, and so we can put up a camera both facing and facing out. The benefit there is oftentimes it's a Bobcat, the truck of an 18-wheeler being used is still the trailer, and so the license plate is on the front of that vehicle versus the back, and so we can capture both the front and the back trailer license plate at the same time, and so that really helps in those kinds of investigations.
Right. Yeah, one of the things I liked about the unit that you showed is how unobtrusive it is. It's really small and it's not intimidating in the lot, but yet it's there. I'm just wondering though, what is the lifespan of one of those units?
Yeah, so you can see that there's one kind of over my shoulder here. They're about the size of a football, not very big at all. And yeah, so they last about 4 years typically. If there is some kind of internal software or hardware problem, the camera belongs to us, which is kind of the beauty of it is we come out and we just replace the camera, without really any questions. Our goal is to keep that camera up and running for as long as possible, so that you're solving as many cases as you can. And so every time that camera goes down, it's just impeding that process. And so, again, we come out there and replace it, no hassle, no problem, keep it up and running for you.
Right. And then I think this would be for Mike, just curious about how the alerting software works. Is it something that shoots out like as a text message? Does it go out via email? Maybe different retailers do it differently. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, it's all of the above. You can kind of set it up how you like. You can text it. It can be emailed. I think if you live and breathe in the dashboard itself, you can obviously see it there too. It depends on how your organization will be set up. If you want to go into someone at the store, someone at the investigation center, just depends on how you want it to set up.
Yeah. So if you have somebody that works the store on a regular basis, they can have the platform up and running. It can run in the background and still get the alerts. To your point, still text messages, emails, and then we do have an app that was just recently released as well. And so if you're walking the floor, if you're out in the field doing some sort of investigation, you still want to be alerted. All that can come to your phone as well.
Great. So another question about the technical pieces. How long is the data saved in the system?
Yeah. So on a standard basis, we save data for 30 days. If there are some retailers, some agencies that would like to hold that data for longer. In some places, it's required to hold it for a shorter period of time by law. And so, if there's a preference one way or the other, we can alter that. But on a standard contract, it's just 30 days.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that is the end of the questions that have come in, and you guys have been fabulous. I understand a lot more about what LPR is and what Flock Safety does, so I appreciate you being on here today. The whole conversation has been recorded, so we're going to be sending that out to folks that did register after the webinar is completed. And if anyone wants to get a hold of Mike or Rich, do we have contact information for you both?
We do. We can send it out immediately after this.
All right, awesome. And there is the flocksafety.com. If anybody wants to go check out a demo and learn a little bit more, I think that's a great idea. But again, thank you guys, and thank you to everyone who attended. I hope you all learned something today, and look for more exciting webinars from LP Magazine down the road. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much.